This is a discussion about an interview Jensen Huang gave with LangChain. The topic of the interview is the process that Nvidia has embarked on to offer Nemotron, which is an open source large language model, and the cooperation they have with LangChain, which builds harnesses around Nemotron to deploy Nemotron in enterprises as workflow managers. So that's roughly what the interview is about. And there's probably three big themes here. One is what I just said. So there is this endeavor that you have large language models, which are next word predictors, that then have to be mid and post-trained into workflow managers. That's something that some of the frontier models, and just for nomenclature, when I say frontier models, let's just call them the closed source API accessible models like Claude, GPT, Grok, and others. And open source would be Nemotron. There is also the Meta family of models. And then there's Chinese models and other models. So let's just leave it at that. Open source means that the weights are accessible, maybe also the way these things are trained and the data that they're trained on. But fundamentally, what you can do with Nemotron is you can take the model, the whole thing, put it on your own premises, and then train it to execute tasks within your company that is fully proprietary to you. So nobody else has insight into what you're doing. You might hire people like LangChain to help you build the harness, but most fundamentally, the workflows are yours and nobody else sees that. So the second point I want to talk about is why that's so important. That's important because it seems that the frontier labs are actually using their access to enterprise data to commoditize those businesses. It has happened with Cursor and Claude. It has happened with Cursor and Figma, and it has happened also with OpenAI and many other companies. And the concept here is not new. It's basically if you're a small company or even a mid-sized company and you work with a large platform provider, such as, let's say, OpenAI, you're at risk of giving away your crown jewels. The same thing happened when people work with Facebook, when people work with Google, when people work with Microsoft in the past. So this is, or Amazon. This is a blueprint that is not particularly new. The risk here is, of course, we're talking about intelligence. And this is the third point I want to make here, which is in principle, if you really boil it down, a company is founded on its intellectual property. I'm paraphrasing Jensen Huang here. Intellectual means intelligence, means knowing how to do things when presented with a certain input, acting, behaving. That's what companies are, whether you're an insurance company, whether you're a marketing company, a bank, let's leave it in the digital space. We can talk about the physical space in another podcast because that's a whole different rabbit hole. But again, in the digital space where you're executing workflows such as, government registrations, legal work, a lot of digital workflows. In that sense, you have companies that have proprietary data, have proprietary processes, and the intellectual harness around that is who you are. So what Jensen said is that the future of a company is its harnesses that it builds around the large language models. That's the future. So in other words, harnesses are workflow management systems. That's what LangChain does. And this is now my interpretation of this call, of this interview, is that companies that use frontier models, I guess I should add a fourth point, and that is frontier models are easy to use, just work type projects, versus open source models require a bit more engineering, a bit more intelligence, a bit more energy, which is kind of makes sense. If you have a business that has proprietary alpha, you have to put energy into running it, right? If your business is a Me Too business, if all you do is sell the same grilled cheese sandwich like the guy next to you, you can just take best practices and do it. And the problem, of course, with that is commoditization, particularly if we talk about intelligence. And now, I guess my point here is that what the way I see this pan out. So my conclusion of this interview is roughly that there is a good there's a chance that a lot of businesses that are running on that are basically running themselves like a commodity, a Me Too business that has maybe a little bit of an edge here and there, and uses Claude because, well, who cares? What can you learn from us anyway? Those types of arguments. All that kind of argumentation will lead to the demise of those businesses, and they will be absorbed by the frontier labs. Versus the businesses that don't use frontier labs, the businesses that actually put the amount of effort and energy into having a proprietary approach towards building harnesses around models and run their business that way, that they will eventually succeed and run on open source. So there is this bifurcation in the market. You have a large chunk of GDP which is up for grabs because it's those low ROI businesses that are prevalent in the actual economy that are at risk of being commoditized by the intelligence frontier lab. And then you have the new breed of companies which will build alpha around building their own harnesses. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's July 11th, 2026. This is Cryptelco. For the year, we're down 5%. The market is up, actually, we're down 4.5%. The market's up 10%. We're on point by 14.5%. So, like I said, this interview, it's one of those interviews I think you want to listen to. It's important. It gives, I think it's a fork in the road. It tells, like typically when Jensen talks, he has good insight into where the industry is going. So I will take him very seriously. And what they're doing is offering an open source model, Nemotron, which is trained like Claude and GPT and so forth. It's a large language model, and they're offering it for free to companies so they can use the weights. Again, I don't know the details of what open source actually means in this context. It might mean more than just the weights, but let's not get bogged down in definitions. What matters here is that you can literally take the model physically or download it onto your own servers, let's say a Dell server, and run it on your own premises, ring-fenced, and have a company like LangChain, and there's a lot of other providers, but LangChain is the one that is mentioned in this interview, have them build the harness for you. So you will need some hand-holding, you will need some help, but the harness, which is the workflow management around the large language model, the actual execution of the workflows, that is going to be, that is your business, right? It's the way you decide how to use, let's say, the large language models to generate videos for marketing collateral, or how to approach, loan management and things like that. This brings me to the second point, which is the risk that you're running now if you don't do that and use the large foundation model types, like the frontier models. The risk there is that you're going to get commoditized. And I think that is almost certainly going to happen. And that justifies the large market cap for companies like Anthropic, because there is a chance that they absorb all these low commodity businesses. So let's say banking, insurance, a lot of, the types of stuff that, car rentals, I don't know, booking flights. Like, think of it like every time you're buying something, a service, and you don't really care who you're buying it from. You know, do I get my car loan from Wells Fargo or from US Bank? Do I really care? Every time that happens, that is a business that probably is using Claude or GPT for their workflows, and that business will eventually be rolled up into Claude or GPT. I think, and that's why I think the large market caps are justified in that sense. Now, the reason you don't want to do that is also the reason you want to have a company, is the reason why companies should exist. And Jensen says that. He says that the future of companies is the harness. And that are just nomenclature's words. But what it really means, again, is that the workflow, the business process that you are building in a proprietary way based on Nemotron is what your company is going to look like. In other words, you're going to build the tools that the model needs to do work for you. And that is what your company is actually going to look like. Now, this brings me to the fourth point here, and that is, if you are a company that is using, let's say, Claude, and you say, well, what can they learn from me anyway? You're basically doomed to fail. And on the flip side of that, companies that invest time and resources to build their own proprietary harnesses, the energy required to do that, the workflows required to actually manage your company, that means you have alpha. So in other words, it is the alpha, the work that you're doing, the time you're spending with your engineers, so with somebody like LangChain or whoever you work with, like the time you're spending to build your proprietary harnesses, that is actually your company. So if you're not doing that, if you're just doing off-the-shelf stuff, then you have a problem. Then you have a problem, and that is you're going to be commoditized, which again justifies the large market caps of the frontier models, which are basically after that business. Now that, of course, now brings me to the conclusion or the question, okay, how is this all going to pan out? Like, where is this going? How are we going to make money with this? You know, these are huge developments. These are new ways of organizing workflows, new ways of organizing economies, businesses. So you have the frontier labs, you have the infrastructure play, because when you have a server in every company, when you have special harnesses in every, every company, every workflow that constitutes a company will require a compute environment or a sandbox, and that's where all this demand is coming from now for agents. And in the future, and this is also something I wanted to add here, of course, you'll have agents catering to agents, and that is a big one. In other words, right now we're still anthropomorphizing economies. Like, well, we're doing loan applications for people that want to buy a house. In the future, we're going to do loan applications for agents that want to raise capital to maybe build a harness for another agent that is building a harness for another agent. So you have agent-to-agent businesses, and that will require a lot of infrastructure. Now, we are invested in Nvidia because, quite frankly, it's difficult to see how this space will evolve. But one thing we can, let's say, if we keep it simple, we can either invest in shortages or we can invest in companies that are building new technologies that help us solve the shortages. So instead of buying memory companies because memory is short, how about we buy a company which is building tools that will increase the efficiency of memory, so we need less memory. That doesn't mean the memory plays are over or anything like that, but this has just always been our premise, and also the danger, of course, of running into businesses that are taking advantage of price hikes is always that when that the competitors will come in or solutions will be offered to offset those price hikes. So that's where we are situating ourselves, that we need solutions for this agentic harness type businesses in the future. And Nvidia is one possible play here. There are others, but that's where we position ourselves.